When historians describe marble sculpture, they usually focus on the artist. The narrative is familiar. A block of stone is selected from a quarry. The sculptor studies it, measures it, and begins the slow process of removal. Hammer strikes chisel. Excess material falls away. Weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. Eventually, a human form emerges from what was once solid mineral. That explanation is accepted. It is taught in universities, preserved in museums, and repeated in every official record of art history. But the first time I examined one of these sculptures closely, not through photographs, but in person, something immediately felt wrong. The stone did not behave like stone. I could see veins beneath the surface, not carved grooves, but raised structures that appeared to exist within the marble itself. I could see areas where fingers pressed into flesh, and the flesh appeared to compress under the pressure. I could see fabric that revealed the contours of the body beneath, despite being carved from the same continuous block. Marble is composed primarily of calcite, a crystalline structure formed under intense geological pressure. It is rigid. It fractures under stress. It does not deform. And yet, here was marble behaving as if it once had elasticity. At first, I assumed it was artistic illusion, but the longer I examined it, the more that explanation began to fail. Because illusion alone cannot explain structural displacement frozen permanently in stone. The first sculpture where the illusion stopped feeling like illusion was Bernini's depiction of Pluto and Proserpina. At a distance, it appears consistent with conventional marble work. Two figures locked in motion, anatomically precise, technically impressive, but it is only when you move closer, when you observe the contact points, that the problem becomes impossible to ignore. Pluto's fingers are not resting on Proserpina's thigh. They are pressing into it. The marble flesh does not remain flat beneath the fingers. It depresses. It compresses inward, forming soft indentations exactly where biological tissue would yield under pressure. The displacement follows anatomical rules. The compression spreads outward from each fingertip. The surface tension appears preserved. The response mirrors the mechanical behavior of human dermal and subdermal tissue under force. This should not be possible in marble. Marble does not compress locally while maintaining structural continuity around the compression point. Its crystalline matrix fractures when subjected to localized stress. It cannot deform and stabilize simultaneously, and yet, here is stone behaving as if it once possessed elasticity. The same anomaly appears in the veins, not carved lines, but raised channels beneath the surface, following precise vascular pathways identical to those found in the human circulatory system. The depth varies naturally, the transitions remain smooth, the continuity is uninterrupted. This suggests something far more complex than surface carving. Because to create this effect, the sculptor would need access not only to the exterior surface, but to internal layers that should never have been reachable at all. And that is where the paradox begins to deepen. The anomaly becomes far more difficult to dismiss when you examine the veiled Christ in Naples. At first glance, it appears simple, a human figure lying beneath a thin shroud, fabric resting across the body, nothing structurally unusual. But that impression disappears the moment you realize the veil is not separate from the body. It is the same stone, one continuous block of marble, transformed into two distinct layers that behave as if they were physically independent. The veil clings to the contours of the face with precise gravitational accuracy. It dips into the hollow of the eyes. It stretches across the bridge of the nose. It sinks gently into the parted lips. Every anatomical feature beneath remains visible, not as suggestion, but as measurable depth variation. Where the veil stretches thin, the facial structure beneath becomes clearer. Where it gathers, the opacity increases. This creates a structural contradiction. To carve the body beneath the veil, the sculptor would need physical access to those surfaces. But those surfaces are covered by marble that had not yet been removed. To carve the veil afterward, The sculptor would need to remove material from above without disturbing the structures below. Both operations require mutually exclusive access. The sequence cannot exist. You cannot carve what is simultaneously in front of and behind itself. And yet, the geometry exists, frozen in perfect continuity, which raises a more troubling possibility. Perhaps the marble was not carved into its final state, but transitioned into it through a process we no longer understand. Well, the official explanation relies on tools: chisels made of hardened steel, wooden mallets, abrasives composed of sand or powdered quartz, simple rotary drills used to remove interior material. These tools have remained largely unchanged for thousands of years. Their mechanics are straightforward. Force is applied to the surface. Material fractures along predictable crystalline boundaries. Each strike removes a small, irreversible portion of stone. This process always leaves evidence: microscopic fractures, linear tool marks, slight inconsistencies where pressure varied. Even the most skilled sculptors cannot eliminate these signatures entirely. The physical interaction between steel and calcite produces traceable patterns. These patterns are well understood. They have been replicated and studied extensively. But when material scientists began examining certain sculptures under magnification, those expected patterns did not always appear. In some regions, the surface transitions were too smooth. Not polished smooth, but structurally smooth, as if the material had shifted rather than been forcibly removed. The crystalline boundaries remained continuous across areas that should have fractured during carving. This suggests the marble did not behave as a brittle solid during formation. It behaved as if it had once existed in a temporarily plastic state, and that possibility becomes even more unsettling when you examine the internal composition of the stone itself. When marble forms naturally, its internal structure remains consistent throughout the entire block. Calcite crystals interlock in predictable patterns, shaped by geological pressure and thermal conditions deep within the Earth's crust. This process produces uniformity. The molecular arrangement does not vary randomly. It follows stable, repeatable rules defined by mineral physics. But when certain sculptures were examined at the microscopic level, inconsistencies began to appear. Not surface damage, but structural variation within the marble itself. Some sections displayed altered crystalline orientation, as if the internal lattice had been reorganized after initial formation. These changes were not consistent with natural metamorphic processes. They appeared localized, confined to specific anatomical features such as veins, folds, and areas of compression. Even more troubling was the detection of organic compounds embedded within the stone matrix. Not on the surface, where contamination would be expected, but integrated within the crystalline structure itself. Organic residues typically degrade over time. They do not fuse with calcite unless introduced during formation or through processes involving extreme heat or chemical interaction. This raises a critical contradiction. If the marble was carved, its internal structure should remain unchanged, but if its internal structure was altered, then the material itself must have undergone transformation. And the deeper I traced this anomaly, the more it became clear that this was not confined to a single sculpture, or even a single civilization. At first, it would be easy to dismiss these anomalies as isolated achievements, a rare sculptor with unusual skill, a brief moment of artistic perfection. But that explanation collapses when you examine the global distribution of the same structural precision. In Egypt, granite statues carved more than 3,000 years ago display polished surfaces so uniform they reflect light evenly across entire anatomical regions. Granite is significantly harder than marble. Its crystalline structure resists deformation even more aggressively. And yet, the same biological realism appears. Muscles under tension, veins following vascular pathways, surfaces transitioning without fracture. In India, marble screens at the Taj Mahal form lace-like perforations so thin that light passes through them as if through fabric. Each opening maintains perfect symmetry. Each edge remains structurally intact. One miscalculation would have shattered the entire panel. In Peru, the stone walls of Cusco contain blocks fitted together with such precision that no measurable gap exists between them. The stone appears to have been shaped while in direct contact with adjacent surfaces, as if it conformed to them. In China, entire cliff faces at Longmen contain thousands of figures, carved with identical anatomical consistency. Different continents, different cultures, identical structural outcomes, which raises the question of whether these civilizations were truly working independently, or whether they were inheriting knowledge from a source that predates them all. Now, when you examine the timeline of these sculptures, the progression does not follow the pattern you would expect from normal technological development. Skills typically evolve gradually. Early attempts appear crude. Later attempts improve. Intermediate stages document the learning process. Mistakes become refinements. Refinements become mastery. But that pattern does not exist here. The most structurally advanced sculptures appear suddenly, already perfected. There are no surviving examples showing the transition from simple stone carving to marble that behaves like compressed tissue. There is no visible experimentation phase, no sequence of increasing sophistication. The techniques arrive fully formed. Then, just as abruptly, they begin to disappear. By the late 18th century, sculptors were already struggling to replicate the translucent veils and anatomical precision achieved only decades earlier. By the 19th century, the capability had declined further. Artists could imitate the appearance, but not the structural realism. The compression of flesh, the embedded vascular detail, the seamless layering, these effects became less precise, less convincing. By the 20th century, they were gone entirely. Modern sculptors possess advanced tools, diamond-tipped cutting instruments, computer-guided measurement systems, controlled environments, yet they cannot reproduce the same structural anomalies, which suggests the limiting factor was never the tools, it was the knowledge, and whatever that knowledge was, it did not evolve forward, it disappeared. If these sculptures were created using conventional carving methods, there should be documentation describing the process. Not vague references, but detailed technical accounts, workshop logs, apprentice manuals, step-by-step explanations preserved by the sculptors themselves. This was standard practice for other disciplines. Renaissance painters documented pigment mixtures. Architects preserved structural calculations. Engineers recorded mechanical designs. But when I began searching for equivalent records describing how marble was transformed into translucent veils and compressed flesh, I found almost nothing. Michelangelo left behind contracts, personal letters, and financial disputes. These records confirm his involvement in major commissions. They describe deadlines, payments, and material deliveries. But they do not explain how he achieved the anatomical depth visible in his finished work. Bernini operated a large workshop with assistants and apprentices. Multiple sculptures were produced simultaneously under his supervision. Yet no surviving document explains how the marble was manipulated to produce layered transparency or internal displacement effects. The finished sculptures exist. The techniques do not. Even more concerning is how investigations into these anomalies have been handled. Researchers who identified structural inconsistencies published limited findings. Their work was acknowledged, but rarely expanded upon. No large-scale institutional effort was launched to reproduce or fully analyze the methods involved. The sculptures were preserved. The questions surrounding them were not, which suggests the silence itself may be part of the pattern, because when knowledge disappears completely, it usually leaves behind traces of its absence. I returned to the sculptures after everything I had learned, not to admire them, but to observe them with a different understanding. The marble had not changed. The veins remained fixed beneath the surface. The compressed flesh still held its shape. The translucent veils continued to reveal structures that should never have been accessible during carving. The stone was silent, but its structure preserved evidence of a process that had never been fully explained. Marble, by definition, is a crystalline solid. Its calcite matrix forms under geological pressure over millions of years. It does not temporarily soften under normal environmental conditions. It does not allow internal layers to be reshaped independently while preserving external continuity. And yet, these sculptures demonstrate exactly those outcomes. This leaves only two possibilities. Either sculptors possessed a level of precision and material control that exceeds what modern technology can replicate, or the marble itself existed in a different state during its formation. If the first explanation is true, then the technical methods were never properly recorded and somehow vanished completely despite their immense value. If the second explanation is true, then the material was not simply carved. It was manipulated while its internal structure was still capable of controlled transformation. Both possibilities contradict the accepted timeline, because when you examine the distribution of these sculptures, their sudden appearance, their global consistency, and their equally sudden disappearance, they do not behave like isolated artistic achievements. They behave like remnants of a capability that was once understood and then lost, which brings the investigation back to the question that began it: not who carved the marble, not when it was created, but how stone came to behave, even briefly, as if it had once been alive. And if that knowledge existed before, buried somewhere in the past, then the more unsettling possibility is this: what else did they know that we no longer remember?